Okay. Flash forward to I was 25, living in Burlington, Vermont, where I went to college at University of Vermont. Someone, one of the crazy people that I had met in the years, maybe in Vermont or some other place, told me about this book called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life by Drunvalo Melchizedek. This book is nuts. Um, and what I love about it, though, in the introduction, he says specifically, this book is nuts. I'm not telling you it's true or not true. This is just my experience, and I'm writing the book about it, and you let yourself know what you think about it. So, okay. So I read this book, and he talks about ancient Egypt, and I think he talks a little bit about the psychedelic experiences and stuff like that. But and then he talks about the geometrical forms that are prevalent in nature. Many people know about the Fibonacci spiral, and that's on the human body in many different places. Da Vinci, was making his art using that, and the Great Pyramid and many Egyptian structures and art use these geometrical forms. And so this book expands on these geometrical forms, why they're there, where they come from, and basically it's all about God. So these geometrical forms are like, I don't know if this is my take on it or if this is what he actually says in the book, but it seems like they are the tools that the gods use to create, maintain, and destroy the universe, as well as everything within the universe. And they're also lenses that we and the gods can use to look into different dimensions and expand our consciousness or devolve our consciousness. These geometrical forms are the beginning, middle, and end of, I guess, consciousness in general and the majority of its contents. So that was fucking crazy. I didn't know what to think about after I read that book. I just thought it was really cool and just crazy and just interesting, whatever. And then there was another important book I had to read. So one day I just came back into my apartment and I walk up to the kitchen table and I see a book, golden cover, paperback, just right on the corner of the counter. And I look it up. I pick up the book, I look at it, and it says, I've never read this word before, so I try to read it. It's clearly a foreign language. It says, I think it's Bhagavad Gita, as it is, by blah, 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 some really long Indian name, which I can now remember. I believe it's Acharya Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Prabhupada. I think that's his whole name. Anyway, it's a beautiful cover. There's these. It's like a battlefield scene with a guy in blue skin and the archer Arjuna, and I didn't even know it was Indian at the time. I was just like, what is this? Like, it just seemed so foreign to me. So I asked one of my roommates where this came from, and she said, oh, I was walking down the street. This is in Burlington, Vermont. She said, I was walking down the street, and a monk came up to me, and he said something like, ma'am, you look like you're suffering or you're in trouble or you're looking for something greater, so here, have this book. And he's like, I'm collecting donations for about $5. And I think she said, oh, like, I'm not interested, whatever. And I guess he was persuasive, and he said, oh, it's fine, I'll just give it to you for free then. And she said, oh, well, that's really nice of you. I guess I can just give you $5 anyway, so whatever. And that's where the book came from. She was a very troubled girl, one of the most troubled people I've ever met. Very sick mentally and physically. So I could see how a monk could approach someone like that. But I have never met or seen a monk in Vermont or anywhere else in New England. So that part was really strange. But so I asked her, I said, hey, this book looks kind of cool. Like, are you going to read it? She's like, no, I don't care about it. So I gave her $5, and then I took it, and then I just started reading it. The The only reason I was interested and I really wanted to read it though, on the back of the cover, there's a quote from Henry David Thoreau, which I think says something like, "When I'm bored and don't know what to do or think about, I pick up the Bhagavad Gita, with which our modern literature seems puny and trivial." Something like that. And I was like, whoa. If Thoreau thinks the Gita is smarter than anything else he's done, okay, this is my kind of book. So that was it. I looked at that one quote from Thoreau. There's also one from Emerson and Gandhi. And I said, okay, if all three of these guys say this Bhagavad Gita is on a whole level higher than all of their stuff, this is my book. This is definitely for me, which it is. So I read the whole book, and I read every verse, and I read a lot of the commentary too. Much like the Flower of Life book, it's extremely foreign and different and interesting, but I didn't know what to think about it. So I finished that book, and time went on, and it was just kind of brewing inside of my mind, my soul, whatever. And at some point, I was on the internet perusing around, and I discovered a way I could get a new psychedelic experience legally. And I thought that was really cool. And it's an all-natural plant. It's called the morning glory flower, which is a funny name. So the morning glory flower is very beautiful, and it's legally sold in hardware stores for gardens as it's just a beautiful flower to put in a flower garden. But if you eat the seeds, you can have a trip. You can have a psychedelic experience. And I'd never heard about it before. But it is an ancient plant, and there are ancient shamanic tribes in South America that have used it, as well as India and other places. And I called one of my good friends, and I said, "Hey man, I got it. I got it to work out. You want to come over and trip with me?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" He was in the same boat I was in, so he did, and he had a very dark trip. So we were hanging out most of the rest of that day and night, and he was always he didn't seem angry. He seemed really depressed and like confused or something the whole trip. He wasn't feeling too good. And I was feeling fine. I didn't hallucinate at all, but I could feel it was affecting me, and it was actually a very positive thing. The only thing I remember from the first day was we were walking behind a young couple, early 20s, something like that, and they seemed like a more prudish couple, like never do drugs, never exploring that much, but they were so innocent and sweet. I fell in love with them. Their energy like directly came into my heart, and I saw how they were flirting with each other, and I just thought it was the cutest, sweetest thing ever. And I nudged my friend. I said, "Hey, did you see that? They're so sweet." And he was just still like, "What's going on?" So yeah, that was that. And we went home, and he went to his home, and that night I slept pretty well, which is weird. Normally when I have a psychedelic trip, I can't sleep. Especially LSD, that'll keep you up for 14 hours, 16 hours maybe sometimes, and you can't sleep. But I slept pretty well. The next day I woke up and I could feel different. I could feel like there was still some seeds floating around in my system. So that was interesting. I still wasn't hallucinating at all. It was still very like minor, kind of in the background of my consciousness kind of thing, and also in my body, in my gut mostly, and my heart. I could just feel something there. It's like a seed was planted and yet to blossom, which would happen later. So I was just hanging out most of the day, and I was hanging out with some friends, and they started doing dabs, and you take a hit and you get really high, and it's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite things to do. Still is. Dab City. Dab City. So I took a dab and I started hallucinating. Like moments later, 1 minute or less later, I mean, it instantly kicked back all of this, whatever psychedelic compounds are in my system, it just came back to the surface and in an enhanced way, even more than the day before. I should also mention I didn't actually take any more seeds um, at all. So it somehow these seeds were still in my system. I don't know how that's possible, but they were. Might it be just a consciousness thing, or maybe it's just how the plant matter decompose is digested. It takes a long time. I don't know. So there's a big Bob Marley poster in this room, and I remember seeing there was it was only in purple color, these hallucinations, where it would be a golden rectangle would form, not golden color, I mean Fibonacci golden ratio golden rectangle would form, and then the spiral would form inside it, and then it would start spiraling downward, and another rectangle would form another spiral, and I would just see golden spirals all over Bob Marley's face, spiraling downwards, spiraling upwards to infinity. And I started looking, or I could kind of see him in other visual surfaces around the room, like a ceiling or a wall. But it was only geometry that it was only sacred geometry that I was hallucinating, which was identical to what I'd read about in The Flower of Life, and which I knew about that before reading that book, Fibonacci Spirals. But in The Flower of Life, there's many other geometrical forms that are expanded on, like the Star of David, which is related to Metatron's cube, which is it's a 3D shape, but from that shape we get all the 5 Platonic solids, which form the elements of all life. I didn't see Metatron's cube, but I know I saw the Fibonacci spiral, and maybe the Flower of Life and some Vesica Pisces, something like that. It's mostly just the spirals. And that was pretty cool. I was like, hey, I'm tripping balls, woohoo! And oh, so then Chris, this fucker, he puts on a song, I think on purpose because he knows it's going to freak me out because I'm in a very vulnerable state. And so the song is called Lunacy by a band called Swans. It's a very progressive rock, alternative, dark, metal, prog kind of band. And this song, as I was listening to this song, I had a vision. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a 100% a vision from another dimension or whatever, from inside me. And it came in one moment too. It wasn't. That's how I know it wasn't a hallucination. It was just bam, and it was gone. And I saw the apocalypse. I saw. I was walking. It was a first-person vision. I'm walking down these streets in a big, like Tokyo, New York City kind of city, and there's loud music blaring, partying, and craziness on the street. And I remember walking past this club, and the music that's playing is the same music you hear when you do nitrous oxide. What's it called? Laughing gas. It's a shitty drug, but if you if you breathe in and inhale a bunch of this stuff, you'll hear this like sound like ringing over and over again. And so some DJs figured out how to, synthesize this sound, and they were just playing it out of loudspeakers. And I saw these kids, must have been like 14 little teenage kids with, cool, like futuristic garb, or so cool, and they're laughing at each other. One kid takes a gun, poof, blows his own head off right in the middle of the street, and the other kids just laugh and they just keep on partying like nothing happened. And I'm like terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. And I just keep walking down the street, and it seems like everyone is just nuts and completely lost their minds. There was one guy who walked past me, he had a hood on, and our eyes met, and I knew he wasn't crazy and I wasn't crazy, and we were both looking at each other very solemnly, like, oh man, I hope we make it. And he just walked by, and I remember seeing a Black Hawk helicopter fly overhead, and just vanish into the distance. That was my vision. I saw all of that in one moment, not even a millisecond. It was in precisely one moment. And while my eyes were open, it just came. And it was real. It felt more real than most things that are real. And I couldn't shake it. I just knew how real it was. And so I call it the apocalypse because, I didn't actually see, nuclear bombs and everyone all dying, but it was an apocalypse. It was a genuine, futuristic world where people will be dying and killing themselves and killing their own culture, and hell. It's just hell on earth. It's not about death. It's not about, catastrophe. It's not that kind of apocalypse. Zombie apocalypse, maybe, something like that. And the song kept on playing, and I was just swarmed with negative emotions of doom and gloom, and I couldn't shake any of those, and I'm freaking out. All my friends see me freaking out, and they're like, "Oh, hey, what's up? You don't like the song, bro?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I really hate this song." And I've tripped enough times where I know myself, and I know if it's a bad situation, you got to just get out of there. So I just got out of there. I just stood up out of my chair. I said, "See you later, guys. I'm out." And I busted out of. This was, I guess, a friend's apartment at the time. And I went out on the street, and I mean, it was great to see the fresh air, the sun, and all that stuff. But the feelings inside of me had not gone. They're still there, and I take 10 steps across the corner, which is where my work is, which I'd go all the time. This was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. There was traffic. Bumper to bumper traffic from one end of this main street all the way to the other, as far as my eye could see, which I'd never seen before. And it totally matched with this apocalyptic feeling I had that everything was just, coming down to destruction. And traffic is, I think, an appropriate symbol of that, Things are supposed to be flowing. They're not supposed to be all backed up. It's not a good sign. And I was like, oh, shit. And I'm walking down the street, and every person I walk by is very ugly. And nothing against them, but it's just it's a stimulus that supports my internal consciousnness of what's already happening, and I'm still in that same negative state of like, what the fuck just happened with me? What am I going through? And so I just put my blinders on and just kind of keep going. And I had to walk, maybe 15 minutes, and I get to my apartment, close the door, turn on some music, and I got my grandfather's paintings all around me, which put me in a much better place. The paintings and the music, and okay. So at least the negative feelings from that experience were gone, but the experience itself was still burned in my memory and my consciousness, and I just was sitting down trying to figure out how to process all of this. And many hours went by. Like I said, I wasn't freaking out anymore, so I was probably watching TV, or maybe I smoked some more weed, who knows. And sure enough, it went about, late at night, 11 p.m., midnight, whatever. It's bedtime. And now that I'm actually really tripping, even though I still haven't had any seeds, but except for the previous day, I couldn't sleep, much like a normal trip. And I thought, oh, well, this will be a long night. And I'm on my bed. What do I do? I don't want to do anything. I just kind of want to go to sleep. Nothing works. And I guess as I'm just laying in the bed with my headphones on and my music, I'm in a place of like limbo where I don't. I guess the most grown-up thing is I could have just admitted that I wasn't going to go to sleep and, done some exercise, some jumping jacks, and then, just found something to do. But it seemed like, I guess, my inner demons were coming up to the surface of my consciousness, and I was not handling that very well. Because maybe I wasn't ready, or I just didn't want to do it at that time. I just wanted to go to sleep. But the inner demons, the darkness, the shadow, that's what it was. It was my shadow. This is a Carl Jung psychology term. My shadow was coming up, kind of begging to be integrated, which is a noble intention, by the way. It's something that you should answer. It's a good opportunity, which I was rejecting. And the more I rejected it, the more it hurt, and it built up into a terrible feeling in my heart, which I would describe as shit. I mean, literal feces. I felt like my heart was no longer a thing that could do love and emotions and whatever else. I felt like my soul and my heart, my being, was just covered and tainted in shit. And it's like, it wasn't painful. It was like, it was bearable, but it was still something I had to get rid of. And so I do what I do the only things I knew how to do. I put on Tool, my favorite music, which is helpful in these situations. And I've got Tool for audio, I've got my grandfather's paintings for visual, and I'm combining the two to, ascend, to get a transcendental vibration, which is more positive and better. That's not working. And I start to feel cold, so I'm on my bed, I'm in this pose, and I'm just by nature, and I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of, it's like the pharaohs in Egypt. I was in the same pose, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I was like, oh shit, maybe that's actually what they were doing, is, these guys were on serious doses, and they were in this pose to get to the next level, which is actually exactly what was happening with me. Regardless of what they were doing or not, that's actually a natural experience that I was going through. But nothing was working. And so what was the most positive thing I could think about? It was a girl I don't want to say in love with, but I definitely loved her. I loved her like my future wife or something like that. And, she's a very beautiful girl, about a couple years younger than me. And it worked. I mean, the more I said her name and fantasized about her, not in a purely sexual way, but just in a loving way, as a soulmate kind of way, which she genuinely was at that time. So that shitty feeling was going away, and I was like, all right, well, that's good. Let's keep going with there. And oh man. As soon as that happened, and there was a connection with her and me, and it was in that moment that I knew it wasn't just a trip. She was actually thinking about me at the same time, in the same way that I was thinking about her. Maybe that wasn't true. That actually doesn't matter if it's true or not. But I was convinced that it was true, and that was enough to have the next experience happen. So some quick background. In The Flower of Life, the Drunvalo Melchizedek book, he talks about the story of Osiris, which is a very famous ancient Egyptian myth. So the way Melchizedek tells the story is, is it Osiris or Horus? We'll say it's Osiris. His body gets cut up into 12 pieces, the 13th piece being his penis. And so his body's cut up into pieces and thrown about in the Nile River by his evil brother. um, and and that's no good. Everyone likes Osiris, so his wife Isis, no relation, um, and some Isis has many friends, and they go to all corners of Egypt to bring back his body, and they sew his body back together. They have all the 12 pieces back together except for the 13th, the penis, and so they sew the penis on, and he's still just a dead body. So to bring the life essence of Osiris from the underworld back into his body, Isis, his wife, uh, blowjobs him. She but it's really interesting because it's not sexual. She uses the same kind of soulmate, pure, transcendental, God-like love um, in her consciousness while doing the physical act, which is gross and physical, right? But she uses the higher parts of love as like a siren, as like an energy call for the gods to let them know that now is the time to bring back Osiris, and it works. And sure enough, once the Kundalini energy, something like that, is brought into Osiris, he's resurrected. Tantric sex, maybe that's the same thing. I think tantra is the word he uses to describe it. Anyway, I'm having that same experience myself that I read about in the book with this girl that I do love in the same way. I mean, I really love her. It doesn't mean I treat her well, because at the time, I was a 25-year-old American dumbass dick. I wasn't never good with girls, and that's that. But in that moment, I really felt a love for her that was beyond physical, beyond emotional. It was a spiritual love, a much closer to an eternal love, or at least, a marriage love, a 100-year love, at least. So I'm loving her that way, and I feel like she's loving me that way too. And it's completely overtaken my consciousness. Whatever shitty feeling I had, whatever the music was going, all of that was completely gone. It was just love. The tantric love was overwhelming everything. And at some point, something snapped. The universe clicked its fingers. And on one of my grandfather's paintings, which I'll hopefully edit into this video so you can see it, the painting is of a plateau in the Midwest somewhere. And on this painting, a really beautiful hallucination just pops up. It's a hallucination like nothing I've ever seen before, because it doesn't come naturally from what I'm seeing overimposed, and it kind of just blossoms the way a lot of hallucinations do. It just came instantly from nowhere, and it was it was like inside the painting. It like came from the painting itself almost. Like it was on top of the painting, but it fit within the symbolism of the painting. So there was a golden beam of about 2 fingers thickness going straight through the third eye of the guy's face that's looking upward, which makes sense. And there were 2 smaller blue lines that were maybe a couple inches long, not all the way through the painting, but just 2 blue lines near the center, and all the way to the leftmost part of the painting, and actually outside of the painting, was red. And it was like a red blob. It was just like redness, like an assortment of veins, something like that, arteries, I guess. And so I'm in this tantric love experience, and there was a connection. And as soon as I felt like she felt the same thing, and we were just loving each other more, what happened at some point, I'll just skip to the good stuff, is we made a baby together in another dimension, in this tantric dimension, and mutually too. It wasn't. It was kind of by accident for both of us, but I knew it was a baby because that red blob turned into a heartbeat and it started beating, and that scared the shit out of me in a good way. I mean, I was like, "Whoa, this is so cool! This is crazy, whatever," and I noticed that when I would match my breathing to the breathing of this girl, who I could also somehow sense, how crazy is that? But the more I would match and keep the love going, the more I was actually blossoming this baby into existence. And at some point, I mean, it just got so crazy for me. Maybe reality knocked on my head or something, and I just thought, this isn't real. This is just a trip. This is like, that can't be a real baby. And like, do I really want to make a baby in another dimension with some girl who I don't actually even know for sure is actually having this experience with me? And then, like a moment after that thought, the heartbeat stopped and the baby died. And it felt real. It felt like I literally made a baby and then didn't allow it to live. I felt that with reality, with realness inside of me. And it just, tore me apart. And I think she felt it too. And I was like, wow, that fucking sucks. What happens now? What do I do now? It's like, that was such a ecstatic, transcendental, mythological, archetypal experience. And then what do I do after that? Just go on with my life? So my first thought is actually, okay, I just want to know the truth about this. And as soon as I said truth in my head, the white light came somewhere on the painting. It was from the same place where the redness was. The white light came in. And it's actually the same white light I've seen in another one of my grandfather's paintings. It's the one where he meets his wife, my grandma. And so the white light comes in, the white light of truth, of my ancestors. The white light represents all of this to me perfectly. And I'm very attracted to this because I've always been a truth seeker and finder and sharer. And I'm resonating with this white light. But there's like a hidden doubt somewhere from inside me that says maybe that truth is not enough. What's the point of just knowing the truth about anything, about the experience I just went through? Like, why even bother? What is that? It's not the end. It feels like there was something more. And this all happened within just a few moments. I mean, it was very quick. And after that, I realized peace. That's what I want. It's not actually truth. It's just peace. Regardless of what happens, if I can just find peace with that, then I will be, I guess, happy or fulfilled. And so those two blue lines, which represent Krishna, and I guess you could call it the Tao or Dharma, or many of the Eastern religious spiritual traditions, these blue on peace. These blue represents peace, the peace of the ocean, of the sky, whatever. These two blue lights, oh my God, they're so beautiful. They grew wings. There were little white wings that grew on these two little lines, and these lines were no longer lines. They were angels. They were real personalities, and the more that they were growing and blossoming, the more I was resonating with them, and I just became more and more sure that that's what I wanted. I wanted peace, and basically it was like a color war where blue won. Blue won my heart and my soul. And at that moment that I knew and that blue knew, the whole painting blew up. I mean, the blue angels, they just flew away, and I could feel I saw a flying saucer, like a UFO, kind of circle around my room, uh, which I felt was an alien. I mean, obviously a flying saucer represents aliens, but I thought it was an actual alien, from another dimension, another planet, whatever, who actually had nothing to do with me or my ancestors or my God or whatever. It was just some alien who he probably just goes around while people are tripping balls and wants to just see a cool experience that someone else is going through. And so that UFO just circled around and left, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, wow, so that was resolution. I had this great experience, and it resolved itself, and I felt some purity, some cleanliness coming through my body, and I sat for a while, but then I really soon realized I can't sleep, and I still just want to sleep. And that same feeling of shittiness in my heart crept back again. I said, oh man, that is really something.